Movies, they're an illusion, literally a magic trick. Still frames projected on the screen to trick the eye into seeing movement and life.
Now, just building off what Mr. McConaughey just said, and to kindly borrow the words from Michael Caine's character in this film, I think The Prestige was built by someone who can actually do what magicians pretend to do. Hello guys, and welcome back to the Popcorn Podcast. To those of you who are new, my name is Dylan and I love talking about movies. If that is something you are interested in, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and look forward to more videos very soon. Just really quick guys, of course this video is going to contain spoilers for The Prestige. If you haven't seen this film, I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime right now in the UK. So go and check it out and come back to the video. If you haven't seen the film in a long time, I recommend rewatching it and also coming back to this video. And yeah, give your thoughts down below in the comments section. I'll love to see what you have to say and let's chat. But without further ado, let's get into the topic of today's discussion. Are you watching closely? Arguably the foremost powerful words in this whole film. Words that are the first to ever be spoken in this 2-hour 10-minute runtime, and a question that most people, including myself, tend to neglect on first watch of Christopher Nolan's 2006 masterpiece, The Prestige. Naturally, we accept these words as spoken by Christian Bale's character, Alfred Borden, one of the main characters in this story of two dueling magicians. However, after multiple rewatches, I can't help but think that this is not the voice of Borden, but the voice of Christopher Nolan. I think in order to fully understand how Christopher Nolan manipulates us as the audience, we have to go right to the end of the film. Now, arguably the most important act of any film is its final, the climax, how the film ends. Can a director effectively give logical ends to the characters and their arcs, and overall provide a satisfying conclusion to the story being told? Over the years, we've seen some incredible conclusions to movies, but at the same time, we've seen some really bad ones too. The Prestige, in my opinion, has one of the greatest endings to a film ever. Nolan has particularly excelled at this in every film he has made, in my opinion. As you'll know, of course, it is revealed that Borden's great trick involves a twin brother. Both these siblings take turns in playing Alfred Borden and Fallon, and both are essential to their ability to pursue greatness as a magician. But the funny thing about this reveal is that it was staring at us in the face the whole time. Literally, it was hiding in plain sight. So how were we all so easily fooled by this? And why, when the final scenes play out, did we feel a strong sense of realization? Well, I believe as a director, Nolan has used movie manipulation to a genius level. Let's talk about the character of Fallon. The first time you watch this film, Fallon is someone you acknowledge, but don't necessarily want to find out more about. At the end of the day, the focus is always on the two leads, and their story is one crafted with such meaning and such precision that you honestly couldn't care less about Fallon. He very rarely speaks, he doesn't make any sudden actions or movements, he doesn't look particularly interesting, and ultimately he just isn't the focus. Whenever he's in the scene, it's Christian Bale's performance of whichever twin Borden is at that specific point that is the priority. As viewers, we get utterly swept away by how brilliant the story, the dialogue, and are so fascinated by the magicians and their acts that we just don't think of exploring the character of Fallon as a film priority. We don't sit there and say to ourselves, oh, I really want to know where Fallon is right now, just as Borden is performing his transported man trick, or Angia is negotiating with Tesla, for example. It is only later that we realize that Fallon just might be the most important character in this whole film, but all to the intention of Christopher Nolan. The Prestige, like many of Nolan's other films, has a non-linear narrative structure. Time is one of the greatest devices a filmmaker can manipulate to allow for greater storytelling, and I think there's no one like Christopher Nolan who understands the concept of time and its many advantages. But the point I'm trying to make is, by being non-linear, not only does it keep you engaged as you try to keep up with the film's sometimes confusing structure, but in doing so aren't really paying attention to the subtle hints that are scattered throughout. Your attention is constantly diverted. Speaking of the narrative, I believe it mirrors the 3 stages of a magician's act. Like the transported man is Borden's act, the new transported man is Angia's act. This whole film is Christopher Nolan's act, not only as a director, a storyteller and a filmmaker, but as a magician. as a version of the very art he explores in this film. In the opening of this film, Michael Caine's character, Cutter, educates us on the 3 stages of a magician's act. The first stage is called the pledge, and is when the magician shows the audience something ordinary, and the audience can then choose to inspect it. I think the real pledge here is Christopher Nolan's introduction to these characters, their relationship as magicians working their way up in an industry, and how it changes following a tragedy that sets in motion one of the greatest rivalries in cinema, in my personal opinion. The second part is called the turn, and is defined as when the magician takes something ordinary and makes it do something extraordinary. In Nolan's case, I think this is the point in the film where Tesla accepts Angier's request to build a machine and allow him to pull off the transported man successfully. Tesla in this film represents the idea of real supernaturalism, real magic. Now, I know it's not the style of Christopher Nolan to bring in a wild card, in this case a real machine with cloning abilities, and I've seen people state that the machine doesn't work, it's all one big illusion using doubles of Angier, but I choose to go with the majority of people when I say the machine is in fact real. The supernatural aspect is the turn and makes the normal do something not normal. In this case, it is the trial and error of Tesla and the eventual ability for Angier to clone himself and have his perfected transported man trick. And finally, we have the third stage of the trick, and of course the title of the film, The Prestige. I think this is the point at which Borden says the words abracadabra, just before he hangs to his death. This is then followed by the death of Angier, the revelation that Borden is actually alive, or at least one of them is the Prestige. Because Nolan knows that us as the audience, we wouldn't clap yet. We wouldn't be satisfied if Borden had been hung and the credits started to roll. No, because in the words of Cutter, making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back. One of the biggest reasons I also believe we were so easily fooled is because of Hugh Jackman's Robert Angier, aka the Great Danton. The film is taken from the perspectives of both Angier and Borden as they read each other's diaries, but I think if you watch this film enough, you'll realise that Nolan puts more emphasis on Angier's perspective. We know everything relevant to do with Angier's character as we follow him through the film. Like Angier, we want to know how Borden does the transported man trick. And like Angier, we only find out when he finds out. We don't skip between the two and find out how Borden pulls off his trick and then come back to Angier still baffled. And the choice to proceed like this is definitely intentional, and I think the characters' backgrounds definitely play a big part. To me, overall, Borden is the superior magician. He is the one who caused Angier to start the pursuit for each other's secrets, and ultimately, he is the one who ends it. He states that a great magician tries to invent something new, something that will make other magicians scratch their heads over. This is exactly what he does. He makes Angier confused and obsessed with finding out his secret methods. Borden comes from nothing and has to work his way up the hard way, facing all sorts of financial struggles. This is particularly made clear as he and Sarah discuss their expenses regularly. When he finally buys a nice house, it's a big deal to them as a couple. On the other hand, Angier is charming, wears nice clothes, and gets along a lot more with others. He also states that money isn't a problem when talking with Ali, played by Andy Serkis. It is clear that Angier comes from a background of wealth, as he was so quickly able to adopt the persona of Lord Coldlow. What makes a great magic trick is self-sacrifice and utter devotion to the art, as stated by Borden after watching Chung Ling-Su's act. Angier arrogantly dismisses this idea and states that any trick can be replicated. This ideology is what separates the two and is ultimately the reason why, in my opinion, Borden is the better magician. But this triumphant ideology is unrealized until the very end of the film, when you learn of the sacrifices that Borden had to endure, being unfairly dismissed by his audiences, losing his fingers, having family problems, ultimately leading to the suicide of Sarah. Fallon is the physical embodiment of this, but we just don't know it, or at least we didn't want to know it. We were given all the information required to understand what really makes a great magic trick, but we were so invested in the story that we didn't realize that Borden was pulling it off the whole time. The revelation of Fallon's true function is also so cleverly connected to Cutter's dialogue that is used at both the very beginning and the very end of the film. Nolan explores the idea that we as an audience aren't truly looking for the secret, even if we think we are. And it all ties into the psychology of how us as humans perceive things that are so different and so alien to us that we just get carried away with that sensational feeling of astonishment. Not only does this film's ending prove to be so impressive in every sense of the word, but also be ambiguous at the same time, with the possibility of a clone of Angier being alive, or maybe there's even a chance that this was the real Great Danton all along. The story heavily focuses on the rivalry between these two great magicians and their efforts to constantly one-up each other. But what if Borden's great masterpiece was to only then be surpassed by Angier's great masterpiece? Due to the fact that us as the viewers never really fully understand how Tesla's machine works, we may never know the true answer to this predicament. Do the clones have Angier's memories? Do they have the same emotions? Do they have the same obsession for seeing his great rival fail? What is the real ending here? There are probably only few who know for sure, and Chris Nolan is one of them. But like Borden expresses in this film, the secret impresses no one. The trick you use it for is everything. So yeah guys, those are my overall thoughts on Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. Let me know in the comment section down below what your personal interpretation of the film is. I would love to know. And of course, if you enjoyed today's video, feel free to leave a like. If you love talking about movies, then this is the place for you, so go ahead and subscribe to the channel. As always guys, take it easy and I will see you very soon for another video.